Welcome to School Talk. I'm Nadja Varney, your host. Do we really care about educating all of our students, all of our kids? What about teenagers who are incarcerated in the juvenile justice system? Well, just recently in a PBS special, a documentary, I heard something that I'd like to share with you, and I'll quote. In most states across America, education for teen offenders pales in comparison to what they'd receive on the outside. Just 1/3 of the states mandate that these kids meet the same standards as their public school counterparts. Massachusetts is one of them, and their goal there at the Massachusetts juvenile justice system is to save these young offenders with vocational classes and good old reading, writing, and arithmetic. So I'm delighted today to welcome to School Talk Commissioner Peter Forbes from the Massachusetts Department of Youth Services. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
You must feel pretty happy about that documentary that was on PBS.
We were thrilled that they really brought home the message of what we're trying to accomplish in Massachusetts, so we're very proud of that PBS clip.
Yeah, I learned a great deal from it, but I'm so happy to talk with you because from what I read about your bio, from your background, you have worked at all kinds of levels. I read that you were actually what they call the direct care worker at a long-term secure treatment program, and I read that you were the director in Boston. So I'm just delighted to know that you're not just an administrator. You have been in the trenches at a number of levels. And I'm wondering, how did you become interested in juvenile justice?
Well, the real story is that my father was a social worker, and he ran an organization over in East Boston, and I was a youth worker in high school with high-risk kids in a housing development in Boston. And so I was intrigued by that, and when I got out of school, when I got out of college, I had a friend that actually introduced me to the Department of Youth Services. I applied, and I've pretty much have been there since. So I've been there since I've been working for the department since I was a young guy.
That's wonderful because, like teachers, so many teachers leave after 5 or 6 years. It's sad to that statistic, but when you've been really engrossed and involved in a system, you know what you're talking about. It's not just something you've read about. I read that there are about 60,000 youngsters, I call them youngsters, kids, that are incarcerated in various juvenile justice systems. So I'm wondering, I hear, when I read the paper, I often see they have probation, but I never knew what happens when they go into the system. So I wonder if you could describe the population and what kinds of crimes, what did the kids do that helped them or caused them to wind up incarcerated?
Sure. So we receive youth from the juvenile court system in Massachusetts. So they all come court ordered. So that's how we get them. And the crimes range from minor to very serious. And really what happens for a lot of kids that wind up in our end of the system is that they've been in trouble, they've been on probation, they've experienced all sorts of challenges and problems in the community, and then they're arrested again. So it's more a combination of things than one single incident that brings a youth to a secure placement at the Department of Youth Services. And then we also have young people that do very serious crimes, and they're sent to us for longer term placements. But a lot of the kids that come in haven't committed a major crime. They've been arrested, they're known to the police in their communities, and they're not compliant with school and probation and counseling and things like that. So eventually the judge makes the decision that they feel like an out-of-home placement would be the way to go.
That's an interesting way to put it, out-of-home placement, because the home has a lot to do with it sometimes, doesn't it? When they leave, they're on probation, but they just go back to a similar situation.
Sure. I mean, we do a lot of work with the families. The families of the kids that we work with love their children. A lot of them are inner city families, and the kids are coming out of the inner city neighborhoods. There's a lot of family stressors there, and we have to figure out a way to bring the family back to the table in a constructive, supportive relationship with us to get to where we need to get to with the youth, because we have, our goals are for them to be successful, and it's what we're trying to accomplish.
You know, this is so interesting to me because so often we don't hear such a gentle approach toward these kids who have gotten in trouble. In fact, there are people who say, this isn't right, they should be punished harshly. What do you say to these people? They say they shouldn't be getting all this extra help and education. They should be punished for what they did. Now, how do you answer them?
Right. Well, part of what we do, we try to do the right thing. You know, we're not trying to make everybody happy because we can't. And I think punishment is the wrong construct. For me, once you physically remove a child from their home against their will and put them in a facility at the Department of Youth Services, I mean, that's a huge accountability piece. From there, our job is not to punish them. Our job is to build them back up so that when they leave, they're in better shape and more able to adjust and contribute to the community. So, you know, we're really focused on adolescent development. Education is a huge piece of what we're trying to bring home with the youth that we serve. And, you know, we have to meet them where they are so that they'll actually listen to what the message is and then try to bring them forward so they could get back on their feet and get back in the community and be productive citizens. I mean, that's our goal.
That's got to be not such an easy goal because they're all coming in with different attitudes, you know, as they come in. So the goals are wonderful, but it must not be the simplest job. It must, in fact, I'm thinking as I'm listening to you that I did read about you that you had your undergraduate work in sociology and your graduate work in human services. So I'm just so glad that someone with that kind of an interest and background is dealing with our young people. I'm very impressed with not this harshness that I thought might be in a juvenile justice system. In fact, in that PBS documentary that I watched, they interviewed people at the Judge John Connolly Center, Detention Center.
Yes.
And I heard that that's one of the most restrictive places. People are locked, everything's locked up and so forth. But I didn't see them just people lifting weights or hanging around. Could you maybe tell us what a typical day is like?
Sure. I mean, it's very structured. Boys and girls. I mean, that facility is for boys. They're up early. They're up at 7 o'clock. They clean their rooms and do their hygiene and eat breakfast. And it's a residential facility. It's a residential treatment facility in a lot of ways. All kids are in class by 8:30 in the morning. We do 5.5 hours of day, so education, 5.5 hours of education every day, which is the mass standard. And education is really the cornerstone of what we're doing. We run small classrooms. Our staff are in class with the teachers, so we run a very structured, tight model. And then in the afternoon, the boys are in counseling. They're in groups. We have, you know, in that facility, we have a gym and a fenced-in backyard where they get out and exercise. We have visits. We have guest speakers. So it's a structured day from the time they get up till the time they go to bed. The boys are not in their rooms until they go to bed at night. They're basically out in programming all day long, and that's what you see across the state. And then when you get to the weekend, it's a little bit of an easier wake up a little later, you know, brunch, more activities on the weekend, but we do year-round school. So our guys don't get the summer off. We run 11 and a half, I believe it's 11 and a half months of school every year, and it's very structured, and that's really what we're trying to bring home. And one of our real primary goals is to get these guys and gals to feel good about being back in class, because they've had a lot of educational, I hate to use the word failure, but a lot of challenges, adjustments, you know, issues with attendance and getting to school and behavioral problems in school. And so a lot of the kids that we receive have really turned the corner, and they're done with school. So we have to get them back and get them invigorated on feeling good about, no, I can learn and I have goals and I can achieve short-term and longer-term goals. And we're situated and we're funded to do that.
Now, do you find that when these youngsters, I call them youngsters, these kids come in, do they have a problem with addictions, like, either drugs or alcohol? Is that part of the scene?
Sure. I mean, I wouldn't use the term addiction. I think a lot of the young people that we're working with are early on in that process where they're abusing substances, but not addicted. Marijuana, alcohol. We don't see a lot of kids that are using hard drugs. They haven't gotten to that stage chronologically yet. We're working with 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old young people. We do periodically see a kid that has a drug addiction, and we actually work with our Department of Public Health on finding treatment, services and beds that are appropriate for those kids. So substance abuse clearly is part of the equation.
Well, what I'm hearing sounds so wonderful and so humane, and yet we hear that so many students or kids who have been in the juvenile justice system, they eventually drop out of school. So we have to take a break right now. But when we come back, let's talk about the dropout problem.
Sure.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.
They said I couldn't dream. Called me a piece of trash and swore that's all I'd ever be. Said a bottle couldn't see the ocean. Give up. Go back to the dumpster. But I didn't listen. I made my way. And now, I am what I've always wanted to be.
If you can sit with me, imagine what you'd see if every child had a book to read. 'Cause every kid across the nation deserves a book to read, and we can make it happen right now.
No, I don't know what you've been told, but kids with books learn so much more. So the mission is for us to get a book to each and every child. So let's join hands, book people unite.
Unearth hidden passion.
Come on, we'll have a good time.
Planting seeds of inspiration to motivate some magic.
To change the writing on the wall, writing on the wall.
And make a difference. One book can inspire a child. One book can be the first thing that helps to change a life.
People unite.
Read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition.
Commissioner, I've heard that 2/3 of those who enter the juvenile justice system eventually drop out of school. In general, there's a new law now, ESSA. It stands for Every Student Succeed Act. And I think there may be something in that says that we're dealing more with this dropout program, this dropout problem. Can you talk to that?
So I would say the 2/3 figure is probably a national figure.
Okay.
Locally, we receive young people that have dropped out of school, have been expelled from school, have had bad experiences in school, and our responsibility is really to plug them back in, get them interested in school, and get working toward either their high school diploma or their HiSET. In Massachusetts, we don't use the GED anymore, we use the HiSET, so they have an equivalency. Our preference is the high school diploma, and we have every year for the past several years, we've had roughly 150 young people that have gotten their high school diplomas or their HiSETs. So it's a huge focus for us, it's a big challenge, and we all understand the lifelong implications of not having a high school diploma. A high school diploma is a bare minimum to really survive in the work market, in the employment industry out there in Massachusetts and nationally. So we're really focused on making sure that these guys and gals get their high school diplomas or their HiSETs and then get them into community college and post-secondary placement. ESSA, as I understand it, really is directing the federal government, directing the states to do essentially what we're doing. which is have certified teachers, have your curriculum aligned with the Mass frameworks, which we do, have a very strong transition process for young people as they leave placement. And the way I frame it is the educational experience that we deliver in class for kids that are in our facilities it's really half a loaf. We have to make sure that they transfer into a community placement where they can carry on their education. And a lot of times that's not going right back to the urban high school that they came from.
I'd like to talk more about the transition, but while we're inside, talking about inside, a detention place or the juvenile justice system, I'm wondering what happens with students who come in who have disabilities or they don't have good English or sometimes no English, or other kinds of special needs. Maybe you could talk about the whole process and include how do you deal with those students?
Sure. I mean, about approximately half of the youth that we get on an annual basis have an IEP.
Oh, that is an individual ed plan.
Correct.
And that means that they do have a special need.
Correct.
Yeah.
So about half of them have already been identified as special needs through their home school districts. And we work very closely with DESE on our special needs population. They provide the teachers. So many of the youth in our facilities are actually receiving general education and special education services. And it's all done through a blanket contract with the Collaborative for Educational Services. So it's pretty seamless. You'd walk in, you wouldn't know which teacher was a general education teacher and which teacher is a special education teacher. Somewhere around 10 or 11% of our group is, we call them English language learners, which
Yes.
means they need support around English as generally their second language. And we have in-house support and coaches that help with that specific issue. So almost regardless of what the educational need is, we're able to work toward that and meet the kids, the youth's IEP and their special needs. It's not a perfect system, but it's very functional. We're pretty well resourced.
A little earlier, we were just talking off the air about the fact that you're just one part of a whole system. And when a child or a young person comes in, they may come through the court, or could you describe that? Because all these students come in from different angles and they go through a certain process, is it?
Sure. I mean, the young people that we receive, where they're court ordered, they come to us through court orders. So they've been in front of a judge. Generally, they have a probation officer, have had a probation officer. Many of the youth have had experience with the Department of Children and Families. They've already been involved in the system, and when they come to us, one of our responsibilities is to do an assessment and figure out what,
okay.
Particularly with youth that have been committed to the Department of Youth Services, we do a full assessment, and part of that is the educational piece to figure out where are their records, what's their status, do they have special education, and then we work on building a transcript that essentially bridges them toward a high school diploma or a high set, depending upon their age and where they're at in school and their interests.
Well, that's, this is sort of the goal that, well, when I was teaching, they were very similar to what you're talking about. And I think we've gone through a time where there was so much focus on one test that a lot of these other areas that you've been talking about that build up a student, helping them to be consistent and getting up and doing their work, showing up. A lot of these things have fallen to the side with students and teachers becoming very discouraged over focusing only on one test. But I think, am I correct, that you do follow the curriculum that's expected for all children in the state? But how about the assessment? Is it just one test, or are the teachers testing as they go along?
Well, there's more than one educational test. I can't tell you the exact testing that we do, but we do a range of social and academic testing. And we do neuropsych testing, and we do a whole range, substance abuse testing. So when I say assessment, we do a complete psychosocial, educational assessment of the youth and really try to figure out what's the best plan moving forward? And we've gotten much better at asking the youth and the family, what do you want to do? What are your goals? How can we work together to get you, because part of what we really need to do is get them engaged. I mean, that's
Exactly.
like job
Yes.
one, is engagement.
I'm so happy to hear that because I started a remedial reading program in Attleboro years back, and it was so hard for people to realize that that first step is at the engagement of the student. We used to do an interest inventory and reading inventory, find out who they are, what their interests are. It's too easy to just say, here are the books, you got to learn this, and you'll be
Yeah.
tested on Friday. But getting the child to really commit and take some ownership for his or her own learning, it seems important. But also very important is the teacher.
Right.
So my next question is, what you've been describing takes a pretty highly qualified teacher. So is it difficult, first of all, to recruit a teacher to do this kind of work, and second, to keep them?
So that's a big challenge, to get good people that want to stay. But all of our teachers are certified. We have, like I said at the beginning, we have a contract with the Collaborative for Educational Services, so they do our curriculum development, curriculum alignment, they do all of our professional development, they do all of our hiring. In any public job, salary is a challenge. We're not, at the very top end of the salary scale, but we're at a level where we're able to recruit and retain. And I think, DYS is the type of system where if it's a good fit, people stick.
That's an interesting statement. If it's a good fit, people stick.
And,
Okay.
and if not, people will transition out or get, apply for other jobs. We do have attrition and transition, but we actually have pretty good success with our teachers.
Well, you probably have an evaluation of the teachers built in. That's everywhere, pretty much.
Sure.
Assessment of the teacher herself or himself. But I'm thinking about when the students or the kids leave, the transition. So many go back to their own communities, and that can be a very good setup for a new failure. So I think you've been working very hard on that transition, and I think ESSA, Every Student Succeed Act, talks about that in the federal law, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, ESSA describes a system very similar to the one that we have in Massachusetts. So we have two things happen when youth get committed to DYS. One is that they're assigned a caseworker who's responsible for their plan throughout their commitment, all the way through community transition into discharge. And then we also have education and career counselors that are really mobile guidance counselors that are looking out for the next placement, the transcript, to make sure that youth are working on what they need to work on to get their high school diploma. We have a very good track record with the school districts in Massachusetts so that they receive the work that the youth are doing.
I mean, excuse me, but the transfer of credits, because I read that
Yes.
sometimes that didn't happen.
Yes, I mean, we have a very good track record with the transfer of credit, so the kids get full credit for what they've done while they're in DYS placement.
That's great.
And the trick is, again, back to what does the family want, what does the youth want, and how can we make that happen with the school district? And we also face the fact that many of these young people have been expelled or have suspension histories, and they have track records. So we have to, with the sometimes negative track records with their home school. So we have to really be thoughtful and develop strong linkages with the schools, and then stand behind the placement. But we have a very good track record of getting young people back into educational placements in the community.
That is so exceptional, and especially when you said to me that your teachers are certified. I know places where they take somebody with a degree and say, oh, come and just teach, we'll give you 5 weeks of training, never understanding how the process of learning and so forth. So I'm delighted to know that even though a youngster is in the juvenile system, that child is getting a good teacher. In fact, it sounds like they're getting even more help than the average student outside, because we are short on counselors, we're short on extra personnel to follow. There might be one guidance counselor in the whole high school in some places. So it sounds like you're doing a great job, and we're getting near the end. So I do want to ask you, considering all this work you've done for so many years, what your greatest frustration or a sense of accomplishment and reason for optimism, or both, whatever you'd like to say?
Well, I mean, optimism, clearly. I mean, every year now for the past 5 or 6 years, we do regional graduation ceremonies to celebrate, high school diplomas, training, certificate completions, high set equivalency achievement, and to have parents and kids have that experience and have that smile on their face knowing that there's opportunity and that they've kind of reset their opportunity in life. That's really what it's about. I mean, if we can pull that off, and we don't do it for every kid, and I think that we do have failure. I mean, we have young people that come back into the system, and that's very frustrating. Or to see a young person come through our system and move on up into the adult correctional system, that's very frustrating. And I'm not going to say that that's like the cost of doing business, because that's not the right framework, but that does happen, and we work really hard to have that not happen. So those are probably the biggest, enthusiasm and then frustration. There's lots and lots of good stuff that happens, and then there's some not so good stuff that happens.
Well, you are a realist, and yet you're an idealist. I'm glad you're in the position you're in. It's been a real joy talking with you. Thank you so much, Commissioner Forbes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And in closing, the education in Massachusetts juvenile justice system is helping not only to educate, but to renew hope in the hearts of these incarcerated kids. I'm going to read a quote that I heard at the Connolly Detention Center, and it was said to a student who was discouraged. Quote, "The charge that brought you here doesn't have to define who you are. Education and hope, that's great school talk."